What is going on, gunfighters? Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting with God at the center and real-world, first-hand experience. Okay, so for today I did something a little bit different. Gunfighters, I appreciate you if you're a normal listener. I recorded this simultaneously on the normal audio equipment and as a video for YouTube. I'm not sure which one I'm going to release first, and I don't by any means want to replace the podcast with video. I think the podcasting is the best platform we have today. Not everything is a meme. Not everything can be boiled down into short little video clips on TikTok. I really like the long intimacy and format of podcasts. That's why I like them so much. That's why I started listening to them and became a podcaster. That said, I believe there's a large chunk of the population that watches YouTube that doesn't listen to podcasts. This is an effort to get them to listen to a podcast. With that, if it makes the podcast not as good, you got to let me know. If you want to check out the video, it's the same, goodshepherdtraining.com. Anyway, with that, I'm going to put in the bio and then the audio from the video. Who am I? A question we should all ask ourselves. I am, first and foremost, a servant of God, made in His very own image, a follower of Jesus Christ, a simple man called by God to the Great Commission to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Next, a little bit about my background and what God has allowed me to do and blessed me to do in life. Grew up what most would consider very poor in the backwoods of the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States, hunting and fishing. Joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. So a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran. Infantry assaultman. After the combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also a veteran of law enforcement. I served with LAPD. I was a sworn peace officer, a cop for LAPD. I worked regular patrol assignments and more specialized assignments. One of those more specialized assignments was warrant service, fugitive recovery. Also had some other law enforcement roles. I am an FBI certified firearms instructor and been certified by another 3-letter government agency in a lot of firearms and training things. I've also been a private contractor, worked in the private sector, pertaining to tactics and gunfighting and protecting America from enemies foreign and domestic. I served as the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. That was our primary mission, to stop active shooters, which sadly are a thing in America today. I've also been blessed to do quite a bit of competition shooting. Started my first formal competitions even before joining the Marine Corps at 17. I had won more shooting competitions than I can remember. I have competed in all manner of disciplines in shooting. I've been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion, West Coast regional champion. Like I said, been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. Mentioned hunting. I've hunted to put meat on the table starting when I was a child. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide, hunting and slaying all manner of beast. And I don't apologize for that. Humbled to be the host of 3 podcasts. Simple Man Sermons, Alpha Male Podcast, and Gunfighter Life. Obviously, as things not mentioned, I've been blessed to do many other things. But, again, first and foremost, I'm a servant a servant of God, a believer and follower of the Bible, the Word, Jesus Christ. And I don't apologize for that. With that, let's transition into today's topic. Alright, gunfighters. Gonna try something a little bit different. A video podcast, I guess, if we want to call it that. So first and foremost, I want to say, if you have not read your Bibles today, stop watching this and do something more important and go read your Bibles. Assuming you've already done that, today's topic is going to be choosing the right handgun for you. Now, that really depends on what you are going to use it for, right? So you got to figure that out. I assume for the vast majority they're going to watch this, it's going to be for concealed carry or a duty gun of some sort. If it's for competition or something, obviously your criteria are going to be different. But let's start off with that in mind. So the first thing I want to cover is fit. Does it fit your hand? And there's a lot of stuff out there that I really don't like about handgun fit that even people that I respect talk about. Talk about how it feels in your hand, okay? I'm a man. I could care less how it feels in my hand. That's secondary. Does it fit you? Not how good does it feel. We're men. We don't do things based on feelings, right? We do things based on reality. So, this is not a real gun. It's just a hunk of plastic, so I am going to point it at the camera. And so this is a replica of a 1911. What I mean by fit, so hopefully you can see this. If I have this gun and the front sight is in line with the rear sight and it's in line all the way up my arm so that recoil goes straight back into my arm. If that is in line perfectly straight, when I grab that gun the way I'm supposed to, high and tight, if I rest, the center of my finger should naturally rest on the center of that trigger. The center of the pad on the center of the trigger. The center of the pad on the center of the trigger, with that perfectly in line. All right, so that when I line that up and I go to shoot, the center of the pad is on the center of that trigger. God gave us this wonderful thing to aid in finding the center of our trigger finger, right, to help us shoot better. It's a swirl in the center of our trigger finger. I put a little mark there with my EDC mini Sharpie so you can see that. But the center of that swirl is the center of the pad. You want the center of that pad on the center of the trigger. You don't want to pull the trigger with the tip of your finger or with the crease of your finger. If you do it with the tip, you're going to force the gun over to the left somewhat. If you do it with the crease of your finger, you have a tendency to pull the gun over to the right. Center of the pad, center of the trigger, straight back, right? That's what I mean by handgun fit. If that gun is in line and your finger rests naturally on the center of that pad, you're going to shoot better. Not saying you can't shoot other guns, but you're not going to shoot them as well as you could shoot a gun that fits you properly. Just like there's other things that culture will tell us today we can change about our anatomy, you can't. And you can't change that. You can't change the size of your hand. That's what I mean by handgun fit. So there are things you can do, like a 1911. They have different size and shape triggers. Whether they fit you or not, you can make it a little bit shorter, a little bit longer. But in general, a lot of guns, it is what it is. Like a Glock, it either fits you or it doesn't. So again, you want that gun pointed straight back. If you cock it, a lot of people that try and shoot guns that are too big for their hands, they'll cock it like this to do that. And then all that recoil, where's it going? Into your thumb instead of going straight back into your arm. Okay? So the recoil is going to be the same, but the way we manage it is going to be much better if it's in the line all the way, going all the way back. So that's what I mean by fit. If it feels good, great. There's nothing wrong with a handgun feeling good in your hand, but it's by no means how you should pick a handgun, right? So it's how does it fit you? And that's what I mean by fit. That's the most important criteria. I mean by fit, there are other things that are important, like this obviously has a high beaver tail, but not getting cut open when the slide reciprocates and things like that all play into fit. You do want to be able to have a gap, I don't know if you can see that, between your trigger finger, because you don't want anything else on your hand influencing that gun when you pull the trigger, so you want a little bit of a gap in there. Probably hard to see on camera, but that's what I mean by fit. Does it actually fit your hand? Does it actually fit you? So that's what I mean by fit. Length of pull. We hear a lot about length of pull on rifles, like the shoulder stock and everything. I would call that length of pull on a handgun, and I'd say it's probably more important for a handgun. Not that it's not important on a rifle, but it's probably more important on a handgun because you have less points of contact and they're harder to shoot. They're harder to master than a rifle. So there's that. The next one is shootability. let's talk about shootability. Shootability by you, right? Can you shoot that platform well? And I see on this end of the criteria, I see a lot of people getting really tiny guns. One, that may not fit your hand, going back to the first point, but two, I don't care how concealable it is it shootable for you? You give up a lot when you go to a super small 380 or something like that pistol. A lot of times they don't fit your hands. A lot of times they're not shootable. Even a small compact 380 like the quintessential Ruger LCP is going to give you a lot more recoil than like a full-size 9mm. Like a Ruger LCP and 380 should have more perceived recoil than, let's say, the most ubiquitous Glock 19, because that recoil is going to go into one of two places. Yes, the 9mm is more powerful, but it's going to go into your gun and then into your body, right? So the more the gun absorbs, the less is going into your body. That's just physics, right? If I put a Ruger LCP and a Glock 19 on the table and I didn't touch them and somehow just pulled the trigger, which one's going to fly back farther on the table? That little Ruger 380 LCP, right? Because it's so light, and that's also going to fly back into your hand. So shootability, can you shoot it well? And you need a certain size handgun to be able to do that, really. So I know there's some compromises made with concealed carry and deep concealed carry and things like that. Sometimes I carry a little 357 Magnum J-frame revolver when I'm out doing wind sprints, running around the farm fields and stuff like that, like I did last night. I take that because I'm doing wind sprints. But day to day, get a gun you can shoot. Shootability. A big part of that is shot-to-shot recovery. So there's that, shootability. Let's go with carryability. You have to strike a balance here. So I'll talk about carryability. So for quite a while, one of my go-to duty handguns, I'm going to drop that on the ground. Now this is a real handgun. All right. It's Colt M45A1. It's basically that, but real. Okay, if you notice, I did do one modification to it. Actually, two. I put a magwell on it, and I made the length of pull shorter so it fit my hand better, right? So there's that. I will not be pointing this one at the camera. I guess there's nobody behind it, but there are some horses behind it. So, okay, so M45A1. This is a good gun. It was one of my go-to duty guns for a while. It fits my hand really well. I shoot it really well. It's got great shootability. But the next point, carryability. This thing is a beast. It weighs something like 41 ounces dry, not including the whatever grain, fully loaded magazine that's in it. So there's that. It's great on the shootability. It's not so great on the carryability. It's a little too heavy for what I'll carry. Now, the gun that I carry, this is my EDC. This is what I was wearing when I decided to make this video. It's not staged, nor am I. I didn't shave, and I got some dirt on my pants. But the gun that I decided to carry, if I take it off, I decided on this because it's a good balance between shootability and carryability. It is a C.C.W. P226, right? It's in the holster. It is hot. So there's that. So this is a SIG 226. Single action only, Legion, okay? It's in the holster. I'm not going to point it at you. It is hot, but it's single action only, C.C.W. 226. This is a good balance for me between shootability and carryability. It is a good shootable gun. It's also what I consider my limit for what I will carry. It's much lighter than the 1911 because it's a aluminum frame as opposed to a 1911, which is an all steel frame. I had it cut for an optic, but it's right on that border. Okay, it's right as heavy as I will go, and I would encourage you to go along the same lines because, in general, and there's exceptions, the bigger the handgun, the more shootable it's going to be in a given caliber. Like, let's say you get a subcompact 9mm, super small subcompact like a Glock 43, and you go to the extreme other end, a Glock 34. That Glock 34 is going to be much more shootable than that Glock 43. But you might want to strike a balance somewhere in the middle. Say a Glock 17. That would be a good example. It's not as shootable as a Glock 34, meaning fast follow-up shots and, sight radius and things like that. But it's much more shootable than a Glock 43. Okay? So there's that. So shootability, carryability. How big are you willing to carry? That's really going to depend on you. Do you live that cubicle life? Are you in that kind of thing? Are you willing to dress around the gun? You saw what I was wearing. I am wearing cargo pants today. I normally don't, but honestly, they're just what I was wearing, and I was out at the range all day yesterday. And I'll be honest, I got up today, took wife to the airport, just threw on whatever I was wearing yesterday. Normally, I don't wear cargo pants because they look a little bit more tactical, but I didn't want to stage for the video. I just wear slacks. Right? I don't wear jeans. I don't like them. I just wear slacks. They don't look super tactical. I wear some kind of overshirt like this or just a plaid shirt, and I dress around the gun. Gunfighter life. So there's that. All right, so going back to the trusty old 1911. Talk about the next thing. This is a good illustration for this. Sights. Right? If you go back to the original GI 1911, the sights were kind of horrible. Most modern handguns are going to have decent sights. I prefer a good, solid, big front sight if I'm running sights. And I do now run optics. I was against them for a long time. I actually took a couple months and trained with them and thought, instead of just, dismissing them right off the bat, I'm actually going to run them and train with them. And I did. And they're better. They're just point blank. I've come to that conclusion. They make me as accurate, faster. And that's a big part of winning gunfights. This is gunfighter life. So there's that. I still would encourage you to learn how to shoot with iron sights, just like I would encourage you, if you're learning to drive, to learn to drive a manual. Even though less and less cars are coming in stick shift, I would encourage you to learn how to drive that so you can. And I would encourage you, just like my gun is set up, if you were going to run a gun with an optic, I encourage you to run one with a co-witness so you can see the irons and the optic. Because anything like that has propensity to fail. And at least you have a redundancy and a backup. But I encourage you to learn to shoot with iron sights first and then run an optic to get even better. Don't just start out with an optic unless you have some kind of optical weakness and you have to. But there's my advice on that. But for iron sights, good combat sights. So whatever whatever you want that to be for you. And that really is going to depend on you. But big usable sights. Not like the kind of vestigial sights you'll see on Ruger LCP, the Gen 1s or whatever, or the original 1911s. But good usable sights. That's important for picking your handgun. You want to be able to shoot it. And to shoot it, you need to see the sights. So there's that. Set that down. The next one is firepower. The first part of firepower is going to be caliber. Most commonly 9mm, right? It's the most ubiquitous by far. It is the only caliber adopted by pretty much every side. You look at like the 7.62-39, which is a great caliber, and the 5.56, which is a great caliber. The 9mm, adopted by the Germans, the original German Imperial Army before, World War II, way back in the 1900s. It was so good, it's pretty much been adopted by everybody. It's used by the Russians, it's used by the Chinese, it's used by us, it's used by the Germans. Pretty much everybody has decided it is the quintessential handgun round. And I agree. Long before it was the hot thing when I was a cop on LAPD, everybody said you had to have 40 or 45. And I started shooting competition and realized quickly that even though I thought I could shoot because I was a cop, I really had a long way to go to become a great shooter. Most cops, sadly, are not gunfighters. They're administrators that carry guns. It's just a reality. So, and I said most cops. Some cops are gunfighters. Where was I going with that? Anyway, when I started shooting competition, I quickly realized no matter how much somebody told me, I knew that I was faster and more accurate with 9mm, and it struck that balance well. So I switched to it long before it was the next hot thing, long before the FBI switched back to it when everybody was running 40s. I think 9mm is the way to go. Caveat, if you have like zero handgun experience, you have some hunting or long gun experience or no experience, and you decide you want to step up and be a man and protect those around you, I'd encourage you to practice and train. Okay? Seek training, but practice. And a good way to do that I encourage is training with a 22. You can get 22s that are very analogous to the fighting handgun you're going to use. This is probably one of my most shot handguns. You'll notice it is set up very much like, it's got very similar ergonomics to a 1911, very similar ergonomics to the carry gun that I carry, and I practice with it quite a bit. And I do that for a couple of reasons. To save money is a big one, because 22 is cheaper. But if you're getting into handguns, think about getting a 22 that's analogous to a fighting handgun. I have other 22s that aren't, like that have a bolt, but if they operate the same, you put your magazine in the same way, you run the slide the same way, safety is the same, then why not save the money? I don't think you'd ever regret, when you decided you were responsible enough to carry, having a good 22 handgun for training, right? So if that is you, if you're just getting into it, and even if not, even if you already have a 9mm, consider getting a 22 that's similar, that operates similarly. I think it will pay for itself just in ammo alone. But that's the caveat. If that's all you have, certainly plenty of people are killed with a 22. It should be treated with the respect of any other firearm. I'm going to put that away. But 9mm is where most people are going to settle, and for good reason, for a defensive handgun. There are reasons to go to other things, but for today, 2022, 9mm really does strike that balance between shootability and cost and stopping power, effectiveness, whatever you want to call it, label it. So there's that. I think 9mm is probably the way to go. If you want to choose another caliber, you want to rock a 10mm because you're in bear country or whatever, have at it. I have this, my go-to carry gun. When I bought it, it was in 40, and I factored in the price for a 9mm conversion barrel. I also have a 357 SIG barrel. Actually, it was in 357 SIG, and it came with both barrels. But anyway, there are reasons for other calibers, but for the most part, if you're asking me, 9mm is the way to go. The next one is capacity. I think this is largely overblown. The vast majority of gunfights are ended in a couple of rounds, and if they're not, then it's because the person shooting probably doesn't shoot very well. There are exceptions, but the vast majority. People get too wrapped up around the axle on how many rounds does it hold, when that is not unimportant, but it should be far down on the list. To me, the first round is by far the most important. Hit with your first round, hit with your second round, hit with your third round. If your gun holds a bunch of rounds but you can't hit with it, what good is it going to do? I was a Marine, the Rifleman's Creed. It's the hits that count. Doesn't matter how many it holds if you can't hit with them. Shootability, meaning by you, does it fit you? Can you shoot it well? Can you recover from recoil well? All that's more important to me than capacity. I'm all about, the Second Amendment. You should be able to have whatever capacity magazine you want. If you want to conceal carry a 33 round Glock mag, have that. You have the freedom to do that. I just think for realistic, real world situations, it's less important than the other things we've talked about today, but have a reasonable amount of rounds. A Derringer to me does not cut it. The next one we're going to talk about is price, because one of my go-to duty guns for a long time was an STI. Now they're Staccato, but back then when I was rocking them, they were STIs. That's great, but not everybody can afford an STI. They might be really shootable for you. They may fit you like a glove. But do you have a $2,500 handgun budget? By God's grace, I did at the time. That was my primary job, was to command a tactical team to stop active shooters. I wanted the best tool for the job because people's lives and my men's lives depended on it. But you have to balance that. Do you have, let's say STI dreams, but a Taurus budget? You got to find something within your budget and something that's reliable. So figure what that is for you. You don't have to spend a lot of money to get a good gun. You can get good values in guns. A good place to start to look. A lot of people are going to say Glocks are fine. And just like the 22, if you buy a decent Glock, you're probably not going to regret having one. I still have one. I still run it. I still run it in training classes and stuff because it's what most students run. And I don't want them to think I shoot really well because I have a fancy gun. I want them to see me shoot just a regular out-of-the-box factory option Glock. I don't think you'd regret having one. I would steer you more towards the Smith & Wesson M&P. Number one, it's American-made in America by Americans. It is very similar as far as reliability goes. I have won more competitions with a M&P than any other handgun. They are very ergonomic. They have very similar ergonomics to the 1911. They're a good American-made handgun. They fit a lot of shooters well. They have interchangeable back straps, and not just the little ones on the back like Glock does, but the whole palm swell and stuff changes. That may or may not help you out. They're a good gun. I would say start there. If you want to get a Glock, fine. That's a good value in a handgun. If you can't afford that, then look for a good used handgun. The vast majority of people, including police officers, they never run a gun hard enough to wear it out. So don't worry about that. If you go and get a good handgun, especially from a good manufacturer, a used Glock, a good M&P, and you buy it used and save some money, a lot of times if there is something wrong with it, they'll fix it for free. Ruger, any of those, right? So that's kind of it for that. My final thoughts. Tactical tip of the day. One thing that I like to do is we talked about sights, handgun sights, or that 3-dot sight. I'm not down with 3 dots, especially when I'm shooting really fast. You got your rear sights and your front sight, and they're moving fast, and they all got dots. Sometimes they get mixed up if you're shooting really fast. So I don't like that. I like my eyes to be able to focus on one thing. If you're running iron sights, I usually will take a Sharpie and black out the rear sight, and sometimes even take some obnoxious colored paint and paint the front sight. Since we are on video, I will demonstrate that with one of my most shot handguns. And I will do this so that I'm not pointing it at myself. But if you can see that, blacked out the rear sights and big obnoxious bright colored front sight. Hopefully you can see that. That's your tactical tip of the day. And if you're used to the actual podcast, you'll know tactical verse of the day. More important than anything else. Fight the good fight of faith. Lay hold of eternal life, to which you were also called, and have confessed the good confession in the presence of many witnesses. I urge you in the sight of God, who gives life to all things, and before Christ Jesus, who witnessed the good confession before Pontius Pilate, that you keep this commandment without spot, blameless unto our Lord Jesus Christ's appearing. Thanks, man. Have a blessed day.